Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about Pluto going out of bounds. And that's really a rare moment, actually. And Pluto is going to go out of bound on 12th of August, 2026. And it will be out of bounds until 10th of December, 2026. It's truly special because Pluto goes out of bound approximately every 100 years. So therefore, we are going to be touching base on what an out of bounds planet represents, as well as we are going to definitely talk about that Pluto as well, and kind of like making some predictions what it might be bringing into our lives. So firstly, does anyone have got out of bound planets? I would love to hear them. If you don't know what out of bound planets are, it means that the planet is passing or leaving the kingdom of the sun. So the sun has got this 23.27 maximum declination. And it is basically, tropical astrology is based on seasons, and it's based on the sun's path on the globe, basically. And every time when it reaches the equinox point, which is the equator, kind of like the middle of the earth, that's when we have got the spring equinox as well as the autumn equinox. That's what we're going to call as the 0 degree Aries and the 0 degree Libra point. So imagine a straight horizontal line. And then the sun starts traveling up and then it reaches the 23.27 declination. What's very important is that you shouldn't be mixing this up with degrees of your chart, okay? So it travels on the globe, and then it reaches the maximum point. And then once it reaches the maximum point, that's going to be the equinox, okay? So that's going to be the summer equinox. The Earth is kind of like divided into two parts, right? We have got the northern hemisphere and then we have got the southern hemisphere. So the sun reaches the top point and it starts coming down and then reaches the equator again. Again, that's going to be the autumn equinox. And then once that happens, then it's going to go south. And then it's going to be reaching the winter equinox, which is December. Around equinoxes, the sun seems to be kind of like stopping in the sky for about 2-3 days. It looks like it's not moving. Of course, it's going to be moving, but it's kind of like an optical type of delusions that we see from the Earth, right? It's not necessarily moving. Okay, so that's basically a bit of an astronomy about the out of bounds planet. Usually, out of bound planets acts very Uranian. Why is that? Because here is the kingdom, right? So we've made this kingdom here, and then the planet leaves this 23.27 curve. So it's going to be somewhere there, or it's going to be somewhere here, leaving this territory, okay? So, and imagine that energy as kind of like the king is not at home, so everyone can do whatever they want. Like the boss is not in the office, so I'm going to put my foot on the table and I'm not going to be doing the work. I'm going to be, I don't know, watching TV and football match on my phone, and I'm going to be on social media all day and so forth. So this is a bit of a rebellion type of energy, okay? So now, why Pluto is so special is because Pluto doesn't go out of bounds as often. So, for example, Mercury tends to be going out of bound at least twice a year. The moon might be going out of bounds, for example, every month twice for about a 6-year window, and then she doesn't go out of bounds at all for another 6 years. So every 6 years, the moon tends to go out of bounds like twice a month. But Pluto does it like once every 100 or so years. I'm going to give you some history as well so that you can understand better how an out of bounds Pluto functions. So basically, there is this annual dip below 23.27. This Pluto out of bound period is a south declination. So it's kind of like being on the southern hemisphere, okay? So around December 12th until August 12th until December 10th, 2026, Pluto pushes beyond the solar ecliptic boundary again, repeating actually the cycle that started late last summer. So it all started in 2025, and actually it will occur every single year until 2035. So this is a 10-year out of bounds period for Pluto. Now, like I said, this is a south declination, okay? So Pluto won't venture out of bound again to the south for a couple of thousand years, okay? So I'm going to describe what's the difference between south node declinations as well as north node declinations as well. So stay till the very end. But an out of bound energy is kind of like a bit of a wild card. So of course, Pluto is in the sign of Aquarius, right? So it's a wild card, kind of Aquarian tech and mass dynamics. Out of bounds energy operates outside standard container rules, okay? So because we are talking about Aquarius, which is an emotionally detached but a rebellious sign as well. So it's kind of like the society goes rogue, or it amplifies rogue technological developments, rapid decentralizations, non-traditional collective movements. Basically, it's people who refuse to play by institutional rules. Pluto represents power. Pluto represents hidden truth. So it's a bit of an excavation of hidden power. Now, South declination carries more of an introspective, kind of underworld bound motion. Think of the South Node declination as your fourth house, okay? So that's potentially the easiest way to understand it, but I'm going to come back onto that, okay? So, but Pluto reveals systematic corruption, institutional decays, buried debt, and all those are coming to the surface. You know, it also represents that the standard power structures kind of lose their leverage, because the collective simply stops acknowledging kind of like these old dynamics. And you know, when people are kind of like going on streets demonstrating and they want freedom, for example, right? Aquarius represents freedom. Now, on an individual level, if you have got any planets on 3 degree of the fixed signs, 3 degree Aquarius, 3 degree Leo, 3 degree Scorpio, or 3 degree Aquarius, then you are going to be feeling this the most. Most likely it's 3 and 2 degrees of the fixed signs, okay? Because Pluto is going to go out of bounds on almost 4 degree, but 3 degree of Aquarius. So therefore, you can expect that that planet of yours and that Aquarius part of your chart is going to be kind of like acting out a little bit, okay? So if out of bounds Pluto transiting or aspecting a sensitive personal positions, it's going to act like an ultimate reality check around sovereignty. It exposes where energy has been given away to potentially preserve comfort. Pluto demands absolute honesty, absolute psychological truth that we have to be able to go through. It's a little bit like hold on to your hat stretch each year until 2035, but every single year, Pluto is going to go out of bounds on different degrees. So that's why I would be only watching out for 2 or 3 degree of the fixed signs. But what I would do is I would be tracking how these declinations shift, you know, with your specific natal chart or event charts and so forth. Event charts, what I mean by solar return charts or your progress charts and so forth, because then it indicates that this is going to be a huge year for you. And if you need a bit of a help decoding your own chart because you don't know how to interpret this out of bound Pluto, for example, on a natal planet, solar return planet, solar arc, progress planet, feel free to reach out and we are going to be able to schedule a reading. Now, the very last time Pluto was out of bounds, but that was a north declination, it happened between 1938 to 1953. So that was the very last time. roughly about a good 73 to 88 years ago, right? So during that window, of course, we know Pluto pushed past the 23.27 north declination, but that was the beginning of the World War II. That was the birth of the atomic age, the establishment of global institutions like the UN or IMF, for example. And also that brought the start of the Cold War as well. Previously, Pluto, when it was out of bounds, but a south declination, that happened between 1775 to 1796. So that was a south declination, just like right now, okay? And that obviously we know what happened around that time as well, a good 250 years ago, right? But that was the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and that was a major kind of structural overhauls of power. So, um, because this is south declination, let me talk a little bit about that. The south declination is a bit of a fourth house feeling, okay? It's kind of like representation of the IC. So when a planet dips past the maximum south declination, it's the mirror image of that bottom of the wheel, right? The deepest roots of your chart. So therefore, often this is a moment when, let's say, wars are happening because of land, or we want to be reclaiming our traditions, right? Because the fourth house, the IC, is something to do with your lineage, your private foundation. So the south out of bound Pluto energy can drag up legacy debts, deep-seated systemic roots, or historical karmic experiences as well. And it forces a reckoning with that structure, with what the structure was actually built on, and stripping away the public presentation to show the raw subtract, basically. But because the south declinations turns away from the high, kind of visible light of the north declination kind of represents your MC. So that's something to do with politics and your life path, basically. Right? So with the south node, it's a bit more of a psychological pull inwards. Public institutions can lose their power, for example, forcing people back into local networks, or, like I said, this is the protection of the home base, and the realization that we have to be relying on ourselves. So often even partnerships can be falling apart as well. Partnership is going to be a huge one, and the reason being is because Pluto is going out of bounds while it is making a conjunction to Juno retrograde. But I'm going to come on to that. But actually, I would like to invite you to join my drawing test course. Pluto is about psychological exploration. So this is a good moment to announce that on the 5th of September, I'm going to start this psychological drawing test analysis course. It's going to be 4 long kind of days, really, 4 times 6 hour day. And I'm going to talk to you about how to analyze a drawing, map up someone's psychological complexes, as well as how to see hidden medical issues, and how to actually use drawings to even indicate what went down in the past and what might be happening in the future as well. But this Pluto is about a reconstruction from the ground up, because Pluto tends to be destroying things. It's kind of like destroying our home environment, and then we're going to rebuild it completely. Okay, so imagine that when Pluto is out of bounds on north, that's like looking at the roof a little bit, right? But this time around, because Pluto goes out of bound on the south, it digs up the soil. It's kind of like looking at the basement and demands a rebuild from the bedrock. Okay, so that's why it has got a lot of psychological power to it. Now, when Pluto goes out of bounds on the north, that's a lot to do with power. Okay, so it is pushing past again the maximum peak of the celestial sphere, right? But the dynamic shows up in certain power patterns. So, for example, some people can reach really high level of authority topics, for example, because we are talking about the top of the wheel, right? So it's like the unstoppable executive, someone who seizes control, establishes dominance, for example, right? Or creating these hyper-centralized structures that refuse to be regulated by existing laws. It's like when you feel like that you are above the law. Okay, so because the last time when Pluto went out of bound was around 1938, that happened on the northern hemisphere. You know, the power wasn't really just internal or hidden, right? It was external power. You know, it was about control. It was about the global military superpower. You know, let's not even talk about Hitler and so forth. That's often a bit like more of a look at me type of archetype, right? Look at me how powerful I am. But when Pluto goes out of bound on the south, usually that power gets somehow dismantled or lost and so forth. Now, some other dates when, because there is a lot of interesting things about Pluto being out of bounds. So before 1775, it was 1524 to 1553, and that was also a south declination as well. Also, it took place in late Capricorn to Aquarius. So what really happens with Pluto, actually, that it always goes out of bound in the sign of Capricorn or Aquarius, or somewhere between Gemini to Leo. But I'm going to talk about that. So in the 15th century, you know, there was a Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther's challenge, you know, to the Roman Catholic Church, collapse of the singular uh, papal like authority, right? Henry VIII break from Rome, started a scientific revolution, and so forth. Then previously it was 1290 to 1310, really. Also, that was a late south declination as well. Again, happened in late Capricorn and Aquarius, and that was the medieval breakdown, the fall of the acre, which happened 1291, ending Crusader rule in the Levant, founding of the Swiss what was the name, Confederacy, yeah, and so forth. So what you will see here with Pluto is, or sorry, an out of bound Pluto is that it tends to be going out of bounds in Capricorn or Aquarius, or somewhere between Gemini to Leo, which absolutely makes sense. Okay. Firstly, because if you think of um, not the eclipses, sorry, the equinoxes. Then we have got one in Aries. Again, what really happens here? Remember the image I showed you at the beginning. So this is the equator, and the sun goes up, reaches the equinox point, and then comes down, again reaching an equinox point, and then comes back up. So it cannot go out of bound in the middle, right? This is the Aries and the Libra axis, because that's in the middle of the kingdom, right? So it's impossible to go out of bound. So it's always going to go out of bounds somewhere when we reaches the top, which is the 23.27, right? And that's the Capricorn kind of Cancer, because that's where we have got the equinoxes, right? So the ecliptic, which is the sun's apparent path, you know, reaches the maximum southern dip, and that's going to be around 0 degree of Capricorn, right? That's the 23.27 south. So any planet moving through that late Sagittarius, Capricorn, or early Aquarius, you know, is already sitting right along the deepest southern edge of that celestial highway. So if Moon goes out of bounds, it only happens in the sign of Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius, because it is around that Capricornian part, right? But it can go out of bounds, you know, in Sagittarius as well as in Aquarius, because the moon moves way faster than Pluto. Okay. By the way, Pluto has got this wild 17-degree inclination as well. So most planets orbit on roughly the same kind of flat plane as Earth. Pluto is tilted at a steep 17-degree angle relative to the ecliptic. So that's why it has got the possibility to go out of bound. Anyway, this might be a little bit too much for you, but it's kind of interesting to know these archetypical meanings. By the way, some planets never go out of bounds. Guess which planet never goes out of bounds? Which is that one planet that loves rules and loves regulations? That's, for example, Saturn. Saturn is never, ever going to go out of bounds. So, of course, that's something also good to remember. Now, what also, I listed you historical events, right, when Pluto went out of bound. And what you saw is that Pluto tends to be going out of bound more often on the south than on north. So that's another interesting factor. And I was thinking about what that might mean, right? That it's always, and then I realized that Pluto is the modern ruler of the eighth house. And that's really much of a psychological terrain of our chart, right? So we have to go deep in order for us to discover how to get ahead. And it really feels like that in the world as well, we reach the top heights at one point, but we know the MC is kind of like falling from grace. We often tend to look at the MC as a point in our chart which is about achievements. But once we achieve something, we have got the possibility to fall off as well. Imagine MC as standing on top of the mountain. You have got a bit of a breeze, and then it can knock you over, and then you can roll down, right? So Pluto builds things up. That's the function of Pluto. It builds things up, but at one point it has to be destroyed as well, and everything has to be rebuilt from scratch. By the way, I noticed that the chat box is not working for some reason. So I'm not too sure. So you might be asking questions, but it's been just loading and loading. So sorry about that if I cannot see your questions, okay? So, notice how that southern period in the 15th century, obviously around the American Revolution right now, it kind of, okay, let me give you the dates again. Let's discover something. 1524, 1775, and then 2025. So what do we see there? It kind of happens every 250 years when Pluto goes out of bound on the southern hemisphere. And find it fascinating, right? And it's always in late Capricorn and early Aquarius. So that's usually a period of time when the global institutions or authority energy is kind of collapsing. Just think of the Catholic Church, or think of the birth of, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, what these were about. Think of the World War II, and so forth, right? So, and Pluto stays out of bounds for about a good 15 to 20 years. But this time around, it's going to be a 10-year window. So surely this is talking to us about the rebirth of politics. Aquarius is really a political sign. Also note how rarely Pluto goes out of bound on the north. Okay, it happened in 1938, but previously it happened only early 1000. So, and when Pluto goes out of bound on north, it happens either in Gemini, Cancer, or Leo. But this is due to the tilt of Pluto's orbit relative to the Earth equator, but I don't want to get into that. So, okay, so we covered some of the basics. Now, Pluto goes out of bounds while it features Juno retrograde. So, Juno is about contractual agreement, okay? Juno represents vows, foundational kind of contracts, commitments, but also relational power dynamics. So with Pluto going out of bound, I think when it comes to the societal expectation, it just doesn't hold water anymore, right? And therefore, it's an audit where power is distributed in long-term agreements, like why am I supporting certain countries with money, or Juno is business partnership, marriages, but legal kind of covenants as well. And this is going to get exposed somehow. The unfairness around contractual agreements, or the financial dependencies, codependencies, the inequality in certain type of relationships as well. Because again, remember, this is a self-declination. So this is not necessarily a time to make public announcements, or this is just gradually going to come out, right? But it's kind of like unearthing historical baggages, the ancestral relationship conditioning that we're meant to be looking at. And if a commitment isn't built on psychological integrity or even mutual sovereignty, that self out of bounds Pluto kind of strips away the illusion of stability of certain type of connections. The core issues are somehow exposed, and therefore it leads to certain type of divorces. So this is a bit of a tough period. Another two asteroids that Pluto actually highlights. One of them is Tatiana, and the other one is Holda. These asteroids is something I have spoken about in my full moon video, which is actually taking place today. And I made that for my YouTube members, the special YouTube members, paid YouTube members, or it's available on my website as well if you are a member of my membership program. But it is featuring Holda, asteroid Holda. Asteroid Holda, its astrological number is 87872, in case you want to be looking at where it is placed in your chart. Holda represents domestic order, the purge of hypocrisy. It's something gets swept out of the shadow. Holda is named for the Germanic goddess Frau Holle. Okay, it's a folklore type of story. She's also associated with winter solstice and domestic diligence. She appears in fairy tales as the matron who rewards the industrious sister who keeps her house clean and punishes the lazy one who lets it fall kind of into chaos. So this is something to do with reward as well as punishment as well at the same time. So I think actually that Pluto goes out of bounds on that asteroid. It perfectly matches that fourth house root level, dynamic of that Holder, because Holder is, it's a cleaner archetype, right? She rewarded the person who cleaned her house. So Holder is kind of cleaning the basement and the foundations of our lives and families and ancestral patterns. So clearly shows an internal audit here. What are we tolerating behind closed doors and pretend it doesn't necessarily exist in public? And then we have got another asteroid involved, Tarjana, which is 3344. And that's kind of like a revelation of specific truth type of asteroid there. So that's an uncompromising unearthing of a specific truth that has been very carefully hidden. So, on a personal level, this could talk to us about family secrets, but institutional kind of data suppression as well. So Pluto will be bringing a lot of kind of contractual agreements to light, and what kind of power has been handed over to others. The other thing is, like I said, Pluto goes out of bound on 12th of August. What's so special about that date? Well, we have got a solar eclipse happening on the very same day. On 20 degree of Aquarius, which of course I'm going to be making a separate video about. But, that's a Leo solar eclipse. So who holds the crown? Is that authority figure a legitimate figure? what it really means is that it's kind of like the blinding of the king. It's a bit of a rogue lord, a rogue kind of king archetype. So we've got this king who kind of acts out of their mind, basically, right? But anyway, there is a lot to mention about that eclipse because it's a very interesting eclipse. But remember, an eclipse is a cosmic trigger of a family tree, really. And then Pluto goes out of bound as well. So anyway, I don't want to talk about eclipses too much right now because obviously there's a lot more to mention about it. So let's just kind of make some world predictions what we might be experiencing with Pluto. Pluto goes out of bound is a little bit more affecting the world rather than just us on a personal level. However, like I said, if you have got any planets on 2 or 3 degree of the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, or Leo, then you are going to be impacted very significantly. But I am wondering if there is going to be some banking crash or certain type of contractual agreement that someone wants to kind of review and walk out of it. Or Juno even can indicate legal issues as well, or trade agreements that can go wrong, or exposing hidden legacy liabilities in the debt markets and banking institutions. And I think we should expect major contract renegotiations, especially international trade kind of blocks. It could be that someone gets dismissed, for example, on a higher level. So they are losing their job, right? Because the IC is the falling from grace point, right? Here is your midheaven, here is your IC. So I just fall down and I have to rebuild my life from scratch. So I also believe that, surely, like I said at the beginning, that's an acceleration of the censorship-resistant kind of technology. Um, Digital currencies surely is going to be, or AI regulations are going to be happening with this, I believe. But I'm also wondering, with the 2 asteroids being involved, surely this is a whistleblower type of energy. So it's kind of like an exposure of a specific evidence about a leader, about a king, about a institution, for example, like how they are not treating employees well, or data protection related stuff. It's a leak. It's kind of like a bit of an internal audit that seems to be going down. Institutional hypocrisy, military defense cover-ups, I can imagine as well. And of course, because Pluto was so much to do with the atomic age, birth, even that could become a topic here as well. But I can also imagine certain type of blackouts, kind of like in a bank system and so forth. I also can imagine, though, that there could be certain type of disputes because Juno is part of it, right? And Juno represents agreements, but it's retrograde, and Pluto is exposing the unfairness in certain type of contractual agreements. So it's a certain type of dispute regarding trade routes or resource rights, or something to do with international waters, basically. It's kind of like a superpower, looking at the energy corridors and so on. So yeah, and like I said, Pluto is going to go out of bounds every single year until 2035. I don't know why the chat is not coming up, and I'm just wondering if you guys have got any questions, but it is just spinning, spinning, spinning. What about now? Oh, so something popped up on the screen. I can see that, but it's not popping up for me. So I can see that you guys are, I can see it on the screen that you guys have been testing, but it's just not popping up for me. So not too sure. Oh, maybe I can see it this way. First time here. Hi, everyone. I saw that one. What game is this? I'm not too sure what we are talking about there. We are not doing any game, guys. Been watching for 2 hours now. But the live has been going on for 35 minutes. I'm not too sure how you have been watching. Okay, so I don't know what that chat is I'm seeing on the screen, but maybe it's not, I don't know. Anyway, guys, then thank you very much. This was a bit of a Pluto going out of bounds period. So I will see you in my next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all those lovely things.